When we first started the Crossroads, it was because we had some older people that had come and were working as volunteers and wanted to stay on longer. And I said to Loren, I said, you know, the DTS is the entryway, so we need to do something for these guys, and maybe we could do something, have them meet in your office, and we could do some teaching or something like that. And out of that, the Crossroads was born, and our first school, how many students did we have, 70?
72.
I think 72 students without any advertisement. Almost, for the first Crossroads, I'd say for almost the first 3 years, and we had several Crossroads a year, probably 90% were the parents of YWAMers, which I always thought was a great compliment to the mission. But whenever I talk with people that are in that older age, I always remind them we are youth with a mission. We are young people in this mission, and you know, if young people being well decorated is a problem to you, this probably isn't the place. If loud music is hard for you, that's just probably not the place. I try to be really upfront about the fact that we are called to accommodate young people. So they may be less experienced than you are, but the first chance we give to give them responsibilities, even if you could do it better than they can, I want them to take the responsibility. And I think it's really important to be upfront about that. So if you do cross-generational schools, rather than the Crossroads even separately, then they're working with young people from the very beginning. So there has to be that heart for youth. And I think it's important for us to make that clear. I can remember a lady saying to me, I was going to be doing this DTS and bring all the DTSs together, and there was Crossroads was separate. And she said, oh, I only like Crossroaders. That's the only reason I'm involved in Youth with a Mission is it's just the Crossroads age that I want to work with. And I said, well, probably it's not going to work with me. She didn't stay.
I think, too, I have the privilege of living a life multi-generationally. Our granddaughter asked one of the students, how old are your grandparents? And she said, well, she was just a little tyke. She said, well, I think my Papa Loren, he's in his 70s. And my Nana Dar, she's either 21 or 22.
Oh, yeah. Don just passed me a note and reminded me that in that DTS, we have some of the members right here. Dan and Sandy were a part of that school. Would you stand at that cross-training school? David Ash was, and Dan and Mimi. I don't know if others are here, but they are all attending, and they were a part of that cross-generational school.
I think David Ash is here, is he?
No, I think he slipped out.
He slipped out, okay.
Just went in, yeah. Yes.
Loren, I have a question. When God gave you a vision of wave, which become a young people and going to the different streets and preaching the gospel, so what was the doubts and temptation or obstacles which try to pull you back, or how did you overcome those in order to succeed this vision that we see today, so fruitful ministry?
Well, the way it happened, I was astounded. It came by the Spirit. I saw it with my mind's eye, eyes open or closed. I tried both ways, and the movie kept moving. And I held it in my heart because I didn't know what to do with it. I think I mentioned the other night that you first have revelation, then you have to have right interpretation. Well, the interpretation seemed to me that God was going to do this. So what's the right application? I just want to be a part of it. And I think that that's exactly what happened. I think God did it, and we got to be a part of it. And in some ways, we were up front in it, you know, as far as those that started it. But it was something God was going to do. And I was with David Wilkerson at we were ministering together in 1965. And he had been declaring that there was a new generation coming that was going to be totally different. I had declared this to my leader of our denomination. And he looked at me and he said, Loren, I was a youth leader when I was young. I know how it works. I said, no, this is a different group behind us. That's the group that came along in the 60s that became the hippies and the way outs, and they really brought a lot of demonic things into the Western world of, especially the United States at that time. Derek Prince prophesied that was going to come. The demons were going to leave other parts of the world. Of course, that allowed many things to be able to be accomplished in places where before the demonic had been in control. The demons only have so many, and it's not an infinite number. And so we were learning that. And then came the drugs, and that was such a horrible thing. And we had never seen these kinds of things in America before. And so all of that came up, but also the Jesus revolution, where sin abounds, grace doth much more abound. And so we never despair, because you'll know that the grace is greater, always greater. It's amazing grace. And so I just waited, though, until somebody gave me a confirming word. And that was about 2.5 years later. And I held this vision. And I was on the streets of Colorado. I was trying to find the streets, but they've changed Colorado so much now. And I've forgotten. Anyway, I couldn't find it. It was on the corner of a bank where Roy Sapp, he was a youth leader in the denomination. And he came around the corner, and I said, "Oh, Roy, how are you doing?" "Oh, fine," he says. "You know, I've been thinking. It's time for young people to have a new movement, something new, something great." And I thought, this man understands. And so I shared with him my vision. "Oh," he said, "I'll help you out every way I can." He was on our board of our first board and our first vice president of YWAM. And he never became a YWAMer per se, but he helped us get that launch. And I found the ones that God brought at that time made it possible, really made it possible. I told this story recently, and somebody told me, "I've never heard this in YWAM." But what happened, I was speaking at a youth conference, and it is 1,000 or 2,000 young people there from all over Southern California. And so I challenged them that they could be missionaries. And this would have been at the sort of the beginnings of my going forward. We had already had our first big outreach. And so when I did, I gave them all a postcard, and they were to write their address on it, my address. No, I had my address on it. But they were to write on this side what it was that they had told God they would do and what God told to them that they were to do. And so they were to, I would take it that day, that night after the altar call. I took all these hundreds and hundreds of cards, and I said, "I'll send them back to you next year, this time, and see what you've done." And so, but I read over those cards, and it broke my heart to see how many really wanted to serve the Lord, but there was no channel that would be open to them. And everyone would say, "No, you can't. You've got to do these. And it was a 27 to 30, to 10-year process before they could ever do what God had called them to do. That could have been done at that time. And I knew that because when I was 17, I went with 11 other guys into Mexico. And we were able to evangelize cross-culturally with broken Spanish and saw people come to the Lord. And I knew they could do something. And so all of that, I was coming from that meeting, and I was riding with a businessman and his wife, Bob and Lorraine Thedke. And as we're going down the road, I was just unburdening what I'd just seen and some of the postcards I'd read. And I said, we got to do something. No, he said, Loren, we must do something about it. And I noticed he didn't say you. He said we. And that was an amazing provision of the Lord. And he got behind it. His wife became totally involved in it and, furnished the office, did a lot of things that we couldn't do. And it was something that just lifted the load to go on and do what God had said. He provides for you. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have just one point I want to make. You can go. Thank you. I think it's really important at every step to thank God for what He has done. And that is part of, I think that both Loren and I have continually, even in our own conversations together, of course we have to talk about the problems that there are, but if we expected 20 young people and maybe only 5 turned up, instead of talking about the 15 that didn't come, what was God's destiny for those 5? And always looking for what God had to do with those people. And sometimes we can have an expectation, and if it doesn't come out just like that, then we think the whole thing's been a failure. And I think one of the things we've always tried to do is look for what God's done in whatever that grouping is and be very grateful for that. And I think that also helps you in the hard times. We didn't have this variety of food, but, we did have a lot of lentils. I had a hard time being grateful for that, didn't we, Dardens? But nevertheless, you understand what I'm saying, and I think that's important. And I think sometimes our obstacles can be that we think the vision has to look like this. And it might not be, or it might not yet be God's timing, but be grateful. Because that gratitude then helps build your faith. And then you have the faith for that.
Amen. Amen.
That was a good question, Darlene. Here's my dancing man.
Yes. For us in Belize, we've hit a crossroads with a lot of stuff. And one of the biggest issues that we're facing in the country is a homosexual agenda. And for us in YWAM, Belize, God is definitely using us as a gatekeeper in the fight that we're facing in the country. And in the midst of a lot of the stuff that is happening globally with the push in the LGBT community and as well as with our schools that we run, how do we as YWAM continue to keep our standard firm that, yes, we will work with youth, but this is where we draw the line, where these are concerned. And how do we continue to allow the presence of God to be very much relevant in the face of this attack that we're facing in our country, around the world?
Good question. Do you want to start? We are in the discipleship business, and we are in the place of working with broken people. We know that. And I think we have to always have an open heart to minister into brokenness, but we also don't want to promote that which is ungodly. And we want to love people who have lost their way. And I think what we don't want to be is people that walk around with signs and try to polarize people or have this, our religion says we can't accept people like that, but that's not what we mean at all. We want to, and it's a very fine line to walk. But, there isn't probably any place where we aren't facing that. But I think what I would just encourage you to be really careful to seek God in detail about these things. Sometimes his answer kind of surprises us on how we're to handle something like that. And God knows where that heart is. At the same time, we don't want to promote things that aren't godly.
I think I was wounded several years ago when it was just rising up as an issue. And I saw this big sign, God hates homosexuals. And I thought, what a horrible thing to do. God so loved the world. He didn't come to condemn the world, but the world through him might be saved. So there's short answers that you have to deal with and up-close answers. And first of all, I think that if people come to YWAM to be discipled, they need to know that's what we do up front. But the second part is that we have seen many freed, but we didn't make issues over them and over it. And I think the issues allows, it fuels the fire of controversy. Therefore, controversy brings greater communication. Greater communication brings eventually more acceptance. I saw that with the hippie movement and then the Jesus movement. But the hippie movement, they all wore long hair and they all wore Levi's. And they went to, when they eventually came out of that particular period of time, you'll find bankers and preachers wearing Levi's, and you'll find that the long hair was there for a while, and then it went away eventually. But in other words, there is a season. Now, work for the long season. What's the long answer, not the short one? Because you don't want to be forever brushed aside as a discipler, and that is that. We honor the Bible, and we teach what the Bible says about the positive. What's the positive? It's family. And where I think we've fallen down to allow for something to come up, like the same-sex marriage and so on, that we literally haven't shown the joy, the fruitfulness, the future, the longevity, the wonderful warmth and fellowship that family should be. So the number one attack, I think, of all the seven spheres is not the missionaries or the churches. It's the family. It's not the economy. It's not, it's the family. And so that means we need more and more understanding on the family. More and more things that we can show. Why have a family? That's the question. Okay, let's just no one have families. Now what happens? And so you don't want that. But don't put out all the fires the enemy starts. Do what God has called you to do. And don't be diverted by the fires. Do and become known for what God has called you to do. And if you start putting out fires, the enemy just puts another one a little further out, and pretty soon you're way out from what God has called you to do.
That's right. That's right.
Very good. Thank you.
That is a really complex question. We recognize
yes,
that.
Yes.
We recognize that.
I'm Narendra Tiwari from India, northern part. My question is, we have so many other names, just like cycle, circle. That's one side. And now there's a better way to go is family gathering. I love the name, the family gathering. And in YWAM we have a lot of land and property in the name of YWAM, kind of institution. How to maintain those balance, because there are two extremes that I see. And of course, the government has a system in every country that we have to be accountable to. I just want to have more understanding, more explanation on that. Yeah.
Good question. Mm-hmm.
I got to have some history. Our first board was also our eldership. But in '72, we set up an international council, 7 people. These were mature leaders in YWAM. And by the end of 1970 into 81, we had what we call the the International Strategy Conference. And there were about 24 of us. And that went on into, eventually, I've forgotten the name of it, but the next name, we always changed names as we enlarged our leadership, because we were enlarging YWAM. I mean, we weren't. God was giving the increase. And so if you're to be an eldership, you have to keep enlarging. And so that happened again, and we had a new name. And
Leadership.
Global leadership, no, that was much later. Anyway, there have been several stages where each time we added more. And we had a word of the Lord in Kona regarding this. The Lord said, don't talk about transition, talk about enlargement.
Expansion.
And so that really, the enlargement of the leadership has to do with the expansion of the people. And so as we come to these stages, when the Lord starts showing us something, we often are getting even a new name and a new softer configuration is what really came through the 3 C's. And by this time, now we're dealing with 20,000 or more, and we're still back in the time when we were dealing with 10,000. And God is speaking to us, I want to give you much larger. You're going into 6 figures. You're going into much larger. And if we believe that, if we believe the wave, you cannot possibly, with a smaller group, cover what needs to be covered. For example, we all believe that we should start, I believe it anyway, we all should have a ministry in every one of the 4,000 omega zones. Does anybody else believe this?
Yes, yes, yes.
All right, about, I'd say 20%, 15%. Anyone believe this of those here? Yes. Let's see your hand. All right, now that's better. All right, some held down, but that's okay too. You don't have to just okay, but when you really consider what we're talking about, if we don't enlarge our leadership team from now it's gone up to 60, that is inadequate, because you're not thinking about 3,000 plus omega zones that have no YWAM. So we have to reconfigure so that it will bump into us everywhere we go, not where we are, but where we're not. And when that catches on within the ranks, which it is happening in the lower age part, they are starting to talk big numbers because God is putting it on their hearts. So we have to make room. It's that verse in chapter 49 of Isaiah that just over and over comes to me. Make room for us. Make room for us. There's not enough room. And so I remember the words of years ago on, I think it was Tom Bloomer, make room at the table. And that was a word at that time. And so we did our expansion. And we're keeping on doing expansion. We're not going to sit around the nice warm fire, is it still up there, and just talk about the days past. We have to look toward the future. And if you don't look toward the future, you don't know what YWAM is about to be. or about to be passed by, one or the other. And so as we make room, then the Lord gives it. I was talking to one of our leaders last night around the table, and I said, how's it going at your base? He says, well, you know, since we got into our new property and new place, suddenly everybody's coming that never came before. I guess it's, you know, it's a better property. No, it's because you've made room for it. And if we don't make room for it in our structures, if we don't make room for it in the softening of leadership and what leadership is, it's an eldership. And then on the elderships, this circle of relationships, that's a terminology that I found out at Mexico when I first shared it with, I think it's the GLF at the time. They said, oh, Google, or I don't know, somebody in company, was it Google? Uses circles? Anyway, I thought, well, it's about time they catch up. But because God gave it to us in 2010. And with that, there's a softening when you start talking about circles versus towers. And so when the Lord gave me that concept of towers versus and altars, well, the concept of circles is circles of relationship, and in those circles will be elderships. And then on a global scale, we need a global eldership of circles, many, in order to include, and I think every Omega Zone should include another Omega Zone, or maybe 2 more, 3 more, actually, to make it happen. And that means our regions should twist and turn and say, okay, we're going to include where we're